Any adult that thinks about, that seeks to, takes measures to, or engages in some type of sexual performance in front of children, that person, by definition, is a pedophile. Drag shows in front of kids is sexual abuse and must end. Who here agrees with that statement? Now, I'm sure that many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. What we have seen popularized over the past few years specifically is the proliferation of these, quote, drag queen story hours for children, but we've also seen them advance to a new level whereby drag queens are performing what can only be described as sexual performances in front of kids. Now, so many people around the world are, of course, outraged, and there's been protests all over the world, but nonetheless, these types of practices are being carried out right now all throughout the Western world. It absolutely boggles the mind that such predatory behaviors have become socially acceptable in the minds of many parents. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have a clip here to show you a few examples, but before I play it, I must warn you that viewer discretion is advised. Okay, the footage is graphic, it is traumatic, but this is what is going on all over the Western world, including right here in Australia. Take a look. Absolutely horrific stuff, wouldn't you say, ladies and gentlemen? So what exactly are we looking at there? Well, you can call it grooming. You could really call it a lot of things. Now, these adults, these men who are performing these acts in front of children, let me just say that my very, very strong opinion is that not only are these people pedophiles, they are criminals. You need to remember that it is indeed a criminal act for a person to, in an indecent manner, expose themselves to children, especially in a sexual way. So why is it, how is it that we have come to a point in society where not only are these practices going on, they're being encouraged at an institutional government level? Let's have a bit of a talk about some of the definitions in order to understand a little bit more in relation to what we just looked at, okay? Because my very, very firm opinion is that these are criminal offenses. The people who conduct these performances, I would put them in the category of pedophiles, because you need to remember that when it comes to pedophilia, it's not necessarily about a physical act, it's about an intention or a desire that an adult may have to act in a sexual way in front of a minor. Okay, so it's not exclusive to an act in terms of a physical act. It could be a non-physical act as well. And I think we just need to call it out for what it is. All right, so let's have a bit of a look here at the Victorian Crimes Act of 1958. This is section 49F. It says here, Sexual activity in the presence of a child under the age of 16. A person A commits an offense if A, as in person A, intentionally engages in an activity and the activity is sexual, and another person B is present when A engages in the activity, and A knows that B is or probably is present when A engages in the activity. All right, so these drag performances, absolutely, you can argue, is a form of a sexual activity with full knowledge that minors are watching. All right, so I say it meets the description of this crime right here. So I'm just going to keep on reading here. It says here, if the child is under the age of 16, I mean, I think that should be extended to 18. It goes on to say, engaging in the activity of presence of person B is contrary to community standards and acceptable conduct. Well, I think that if we conducted a survey of Australians, let alone Victorians, they would overwhelmingly agree that these drag performances in front of children do not meet community standards of what is considered acceptable conduct. I would say it's only a bizarre and twisted and perverse cohort of parents out there who seem to think that it's a good idea to take their little children to see these performances. I mean, what goes through the minds of these parents? They just wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to get my 5-year-old kid and take my kid to see some explicit drag performance because apparently that's good. Let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Right now, young kids in China, they're learning how to assemble Glocks. And in the Western world, you've got parents taking their kids to see these types of shows. You know, if we continue on this trajectory, we're going to get eaten alive, and all of our adversaries, they won't have to fire a bullet. The West is going to destroy itself from the inside out unless we, the people, take a stand against this absolute garbage, this institutionalized abuse. All right, it goes on to say here, a person who commits an offense against subsection 1 is liable to level 5 imprisonment, 10 years maximum. All right, so in my opinion, these so-called performers, these predators, they don't belong in front of children. They belong in jail. I'm just going to keep reading along here. All right, so what we've got here is from the Australian Government Guides to Social Policy Law National Readiness Guide. Sexual abuse. Definition. Sexual abuse of a child is when someone involves a person under the age of 18 in sexual activities they do not understand or that are against accepted community standards. All right, again, this is in regards to activity. So an activity may not necessarily be some sort of physical interaction. It could be indecent exposure, and that's exactly what we're seeing. These people are blatantly breaking our laws, and they're being encouraged to do so, but not just any laws, crimes against the most vulnerable people in our society, children. All right, so it goes on to say that child sexual abuse may include, but is not limited to, preparing or encouraging a child to engage in sexual activity. That's what I say those performances are. It's grooming. It's trying to insert certain depraved notions into the minds of young, malleable children, and it's disgusting, it's predatory, and the fact that we allow this sort of thing to go on in our country is absolutely disgusting. It makes me so horribly ashamed of our government to turn a blind eye. So, you know, shame on the Labor Party and shame on anyone in the Liberal Party who has turned a blind eye and who is not calling this out. You know, there's a lot of people in the Liberal Party that call themselves Christians, yeah? And they completely ignore this sort of stuff because they don't want to rock the boat. Maybe they're happy being in opposition. Maybe they like receiving their easy $200,000 a year. Just sit in your chair, shut your mouth, don't stand up for anything, don't stand up for the kids, and maybe you'll be re-elected. I tell you what, there's too many politicians in our country that are completely spineless to the extent where they would rather keep their seat than speak up and fight for the most vulnerable people in our country, which of course are kids. Alrighty, so I made a comment before where I said these people are pedophiles, and I believe they are because, listen, here's the truth, right? Any adult that thinks about, that seeks to, takes measures to, or engages in some type of sexual performance in front of children, that person, by definition, is a pedophile. Okay, pedophilia does not necessarily refer to a physical act. it could be a non-physical act. It's all about the mindset that these depraved people have, okay? They're not normal. They have a predisposition. They're attracted to people under the age of 18. It is an absolute disgusting sickness that never ever should be normalized the way that it has been here in the Western world for far too long. Here's a definition here from the Cambridge Dictionary. It says here, quote, pedophilia, the condition of being sexually interested in children or sexual activity with children. Okay, so it's not a physical act that constitutes what a pedophile is. All right, moving along here, we see that in America, a US state, referring to the state of Tennessee, outlawed public drag shows, now a push for bans across America. That's right. So we have one Republican state after another trying to ban public drag shows. But that's not really enough, is it, ladies and gentlemen? I say yes, ban the public drag shows, but ban these shows in front of children under any circumstances. Doesn't matter if it's in a private venue. I mean, a private venue does not give the right to anyone to sexually exploit children. It's as simple as that. A crime against a child is a crime against a child, whether it's done in public or done in private. Now, we see when we have a look throughout the internet that there has indeed been people in these positions, and they've hid behind the cloak of equality, and they've stood in front of the rainbow flag and said we're all about equality. But there's been several individuals, right, these so-called drag queens, that have actually been charged with sexual assault. All you need to do is do a bit of Googling. I'll just give you a couple examples here. Drag queen storytime reader once charged with child sexual assault. So this guy was let in there to perform in front of kids, and he had actually been charged for that crime in the past. Here's another one right here. Central Pennsylvania drag performer charged with 25 counts of child pornography. In the UK, another one, drag queen charged on 3 counts of related to child sexual abuse materials. Now, let me just say something before I go any further. Listen, if you're a grown adult and you're a drag queen and you want to do performances in front of other adults, you go ahead and do it. I don't care what 2 consenting adults do behind closed doors. I don't want to look at that stuff, but if you want to do it behind closed doors, then you just go ahead and do it. But leave the kids alone, you sick bastards. Leave the kids alone. It's not going to end well for any of these child groomers out there that think all of a sudden that society is changing and they can carry out their sick, twisted, and demented fantasies. I'm telling you, it's not going to go down well. It's not going to go down well. The people will rise up and put an end to it. I am so confident in that. And we look across the pond to the state of Florida and we get some hope from the great governor, Ron DeSantis. Says here, quote, DeSantis weighs ordering Child Protective Services to investigate parents who take kids to drag shows. Absolutely. Absolutely. What parent in their right mind would voluntarily expose their children to this type of depravity, ladies and gentlemen? The Western world is in the gutter. Let me tell you something. They're not doing this in Russia. They're not doing it in Ukraine, right? They're not doing it in Serbia. They're not doing it in the Czech Republic. They're not doing it in China. They're not doing it in Singapore. Where are these so-called drag performances in front of children taking place? It's exclusively the Western world. You look at Germany, countries west of Germany, the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the United States. These Western countries are destroying themselves from the inside out, and unless there is a major correction in this disastrous course, then our countries will absolutely crumble to the ground. Remember, the future leaders of our country are our children. We have an obligation to protect our children, to shield them from groomers, to shield them from the worst people in our society, which are, of course, pedophiles. So let me say it again, that any adult that performs these types of routines in front of children, any adult that seeks to perform a sexual act, or who thinks about it, or who does it, that person is a pedophile. That person is a criminal. We need to call it out and use these definitive terms and not simply turn the other cheek. So to all you liberal politicians out there that claim to be Christian and claim to be conservative, honestly, I don't think that you are either of those two things if you continue to sit there in silence whilst this type of grooming, this exploitation, these criminal acts against children are getting carried out. And to all you parents out there who think that it's a good idea to expose your children to this grooming, you have been sold a bill of lies, an absolute bill of lies. Is this some type of competition to see who is the most progressive person living down your street? Is that what it is? Is this keeping up with the Joneses? Oh, well, what did you do on the weekend? I took my kid to see a drag queen story time. Oh, yeah, well, my kid's transitioning next week. Is this some sort of sick competition for you people? Honestly, having a child is a sacred thing, and every child deserves to be protected. And I'll keep beating this drum, ladies and gentlemen. And also, I want to call on people from the Pride movement. That's right. So if you're a Pride activist, if you're a LGBT activist, speak up. Do you really want this to be a stain on your movement? Do you really want to be providing cover for pedophiles under the rainbow? Or do you want to separate yourself from it? The time to stand up is now and to call this out for what it is. No one cares what two consenting adults do behind closed doors as long as no one's getting hurt. We're not saying anything about that, but leave the kids alone. It's not going to end well for you if you keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for watching. To make sure you never miss an episode, sign up at mcjreport.com. Catch you on the next one.